Hey guys, I'm going to take you guys through a macroeconomic FRQs. Um, this first problem is one that we usually find where we're going to look at the overall macroeconomy, see some effects to it, talk about monetary and fiscal policies around it, yada, yada, yada. Except this one uh, primarily has to do with some international trade stuff here. So we're actually going to skip it, okay, because a lot of it's contingent on this international trade stuff. And as you know, that will not be on the exam this year. So we'll move on to this problem number two, which um, good thing is talking about the macroeconomy as well. So kind of don't get to miss out on that type of problem. So anyway, assume that the um, economy of Uche land is currently at full employment. The government of Ucheland reduces the tax rate on household interest earnings. What will happen to private savings in Ucheland? All right, so interest earnings, the tax rate has been lowered, so it's more attractive to put your earnings into or put your income into savings because you will get a higher return now because you're not taxed. So private savings will increase. Okay. Next, draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market and show the effect of the change in private savings identified in Part A and the equilibrium interest rate. All right, simple enough. Um, as we already said, got a amount of loanable funds, real interest rate, downward sloping demand, which is usually investment spending, and upward sloping supply, which is our savings. We had some sort of equilibrium interest rate. Um, Savings will increase now because it's more attractive to save your money since you don't get taxed on your interest. So that's going to cause private savings to increase. As savings increases, that increases the supply of loanable funds, which decreases the real interest rate. Okay, great. Given the real interest rate change identified in Part B, answer the following questions. What will the short run effect on aggregate demand? And we need to explain. So, since the uh, excuse me, since the interest rate has fallen, it'll increase purchases of interest sensitive spending. It'll increase interest sensitive spending on consumption goods and mostly investment goods, and that'll increase aggregate demand. And so there's your short run effect. Yeah, there's your explanation. Two was the long run effect of potential real gross domestic product in Uche land. Because the decreased interest rate, this will increase the investment spending, which will increase capital formation or capital accumulation. And as capital formation or accumulation increases, that'll increase the longer and aggregate supply curve, which will increase the potential real gross domestic product of Uche land. Okay. So let's see our scoring here. See if we had any issues. You got your point for saying private savings will increase. Here's your correctly labeled graph showing the increase in supply of loanable funds or of savings and the decreased real interest rate. Aggregate demand will increase and explain the decrease in real investment. Real interest rate will result in an increase in interest sensitive spending. 1 point is earned for saying that the potential real gross domestic product will increase. Increase in capital formation brought about by the increase in investment spending. Okay, and it'll increase the long run aggregate supply. So easy enough, straightforward one there. I chose this FRQ because I really like this question. It's kind of the only one I've ever seen where purely about unemployment. Um, so we'll go through this one. Uh, Pretty unique. Don't know if you'd really see it, but lets us kind of touch on a point about macroeconomics that we might have not talked about. So anyway, I might have not talked about when reviewing, but we talked about during the school year. All right, countries face trade-offs between producing consumer goods and producing capital goods. A country X takes 1 hour to produce a unit of consumer goods and 2 hours to produce a unit of capital goods. Country Y takes 2 hours to produce a unit of consumer goods and 4 hours to produce a unit of capital good. Which country has comparative advantage in the production of consumer goods? Okay, so this is actually your classic uh, specialization and trade problem. Okay, so so we're looking at comparative advantage in consumer goods. Okay, um, so we want to see how much capital we give up per consumer. Okay, so capital per consumer. Okay, let's see for whom it's cheaper to produce consumer goods. Okay, country X takes 1 hour to produce consumer goods versus 2 hours. So two versus what, 4 hours over one. So that's four. So it's cheaper for country X to produce um, consumer goods. Okay. Because the opportunity cost is less. Okay. Country X only gives up two capital goods per consumer good, whereas countrywide gives up 4 units of capital per consumer good. So it's cheaper for the opportunity cost is less for country X, which means that they have a comparative advantage in the production of consumer goods. Okay. So that's pretty normal. That's the type of question that we get a lot. But this is where it's a little abnormal, is when we're talking about our employment. So this is the labor market data for country X. We have employed, frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, cyclical unemployment, and not in the labor force. Okay. Reminder: frictional unemployment is that type of employment because people are just moving between jobs or getting laid off or not necessarily laid off, but getting fired or so forth. So there's always going to be some sort of frictional unemployment due to that there's just always just kind of a churn of employment. Cyclical or structural unemployment is that type of unemployment that comes from being replaced by technology or something becoming obsolete, or there's some sort of discrimination or some sort of labor union kind of intractability. So something that's within the economy that's kind of out of the control of out of control of the people that are in the economy, or out of control of the actual business cycle, or outside the business cycle. And then finally, cyclical unemployment, that has to do with the business cycle. If there's cyclical unemployment, there is a recession going on. Okay. All right. And then, of course, we have folks that are just not in the labor force. They're not seeking employment, nor are they employed. All right. So it says calculate the unemployment rate in country X and show your work. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to add up everybody that is unemployed. Okay. And so that's only the frictional, structural, and cyclical unemployed folks, and that's 20,000. And that's out of the entire labor force, which the labor force are the employed plus the unemployed. So that's 180,000 plus the 20,000, which is 200,000. Okay. So this is 2 over 20, which is 1 over 10, which is 10%. Okay. So there's 10% unemployment. All right. Labor force participation rate, that's a different type of calculation. What we're going to show is the total adult population and the percent of that population that is in the labor force. So first, we know how many people are in the labor force, which is 200,000. But our adult population is 200,000 plus this 100,000 who are not in the labor force. They could be discouraged workers, they could be retired, they could be homemakers, they could be any number of things. All right. That's 2/3, which is about 67%. Okay. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the production possibilities curve for country X with consumer goods on the horizontal axis and capital goods on the vertical axis. Indicate a point on your graph labeled Z that reflects the current level of unemployment. Okay. So, what was it? Consumer versus capital. I know this is real small, but I just want to get this in real quick. What was it? We could get uh, consumer goods, or you make more consumer goods than capital goods with less time. I'm going to put Z inside of the curve right here, somewhere inside, because we're not fully employing all of our resources because there is some cyclical unemployment. Okay. All right, let's look at the scoring guide real quick. Oh, 1 point is earned for saying that neither country has comparative advantage in producing consumer goods and explaining that the opportunity cost of one consumer good is the same for both countries. What did I miss here? Let's see. Was it uh yep, country Y. It's not 1 hour to produce consumer goods, it's 2 hours. So it'd been 4/2, which is also one half, or which is also two. So my bad there. Um, okay. 10% unemployment rate, about 67% labor force participation. Make sure you show your work there. And then there's your, again, make sure you show that they would produce fewer capital goods than consumer goods because it takes longer to make capital goods. And make sure that Z is within the PPC because we have cyclical unemployment. So we're not at full employment, full production. Okay. All right. Thanks for the attention.